How dare you? Gregory Hensley's voice cracked like thunder across the dimly lit parking lot, his polished leather shoes screeching against the concrete. His hand clamped tightly around Naomi Clark's neck, forcing her back against the cold pillar. It happened so fast that no one nearby had time to process what was happening. One moment, the underground lot hummed with the low echo of engines and the distant rumble of traffic. The next, silence fell, broken only by Gregory's ragged breathing and the squeak of a mop bucket rolling to a stop. Naomi's cleaning cloth slipped from her fingers, fluttering uselessly to the ground. Gregory's pale face twisted with hatred as he spat his words close enough for Naomi to feel the venom. You filthy woman. Do you even know what you've done? Do you know who I am? The offense? A simple accident. Naomi, mopping diligently in her Navy uniform, had stepped back, just one miscalculated step, and left a faint streak of dirt on his $1,000 shoes. Shoes he loved more than the dignity of a human being. Before I continue with this shocking story, smash that subscribe button and turn on the bell, because what you're about to hear isn't just another story, it's a fight for dignity. And while you're here, comment where you're watching from, because this one, it's going to shake you. Gregory Hensley's grip was firm, his face red with a rage that boiled deeper than a simple accident. His Italian shoes, polished to a mirror shine, bore the faint trace of dirt Naomi's mop had dragged across. That was all it took. His disgust for her, always simmering, erupted in front of the empty cars and painted lines of the sprawling parking lot. Naomi gasped, her hands clawing at his wrist, the weight of his arrogance pressing down as much as his strength. She had apologized already, her voice quiet, respectful, desperate to defuse. But Gregory didn't hear apologies. He only heard the audacity of someone he thought beneath him daring to touch what he considered untouchable. His words sliced sharper than his grip. You think you can soil me? Trash like you should know your place. The air buzzed with tension, the low rumble of traffic in the distance, contrasting with the chaos of this sudden assault. Naomi's knees buckled, and the mop she held slipped from her fingers, clattering against the pavement. Her cleaning cart rolled a few feet, its wheels squeaking before it wobbled to a stop. To Gregory, she was invisible, a background figure meant to scrub floors and stay silent. To him, this was an insult worth punishing. But Naomi's eyes told a different story. Behind the panic, there was a steel he couldn't see. A discipline forged long before Crestwood Towers ever hired her to sweep up after wealthy tenants. While Gregory spat venom about her being worthless, memories flashed through her mind. She had stood on desert soil with the weight of armor pressing on her shoulders. She had learned to steady her breathing under fire, to stay calm when chaos swallowed the world. She had fought battles far more terrifying than a man in an expensive suit with hate in his eyes. But Naomi didn't fight back. Not yet. She let him rage, his fingers tightening, his pride swelling. She let the sound of his own arrogance echo in his ears. And as his voice grew louder, the emptiness of the parking lot didn't feel so empty anymore. Two valet attendants at the far end froze in place, unsure whether to intervene. A delivery driver slowed his step, phone halfway raised. Gregory was too drunk on his own fury to notice, his spit flying as he leaned closer, snarling words meant to crush. You'll never be more than dirt under my shoe. Do you hear me? He hissed, his forehead almost touching hers. Naomi's chest rose and fell, her breathing ragged, but her gaze never broke. She looked directly into his eyes, silent, steady. That look rattled him more than a scream would have. For the first time, something flickered in Gregory's gaze, a hesitation, a shadow of doubt. But pride is poison, and he swallowed it whole, tightening his grip again. Naomi's body remembered what her mind told her to hold back. Muscles tensed, her stance shifting subtly, as if her training wanted to rise. Years of combat drills whispered through her bones. The urge to break free, to turn his arrogance into his undoing, surged inside her. But she resisted. Not yet. She knew when to strike, and she knew the power of restraint. Gregory, blinded by hate, mistook her silence for weakness. He sneered, yanking her forward before shoving her down onto the cold pavement. Naomi landed hard, her palms scraping against rough concrete. The sting of pain spread across her skin, but her eyes stayed calm, steady, as she pushed herself up onto her knees. His shadow towered over her, his laughter sharp and cruel. "You think you matter? Look at you, crawling like the nobody you are." His voice rang through the garage like a whip. The valet attendants exchanged a glance, one whispering to the other. The delivery driver had stopped entirely now, his phone lifted, capturing every second. Gregory still didn't notice. His world was too small, too consumed by his own reflection and power. He pointed down at Naomi, his finger jabbing the air like a sword. "People like you will never rise above. Remember that." Naomi rose slowly, her hands steady as she stood. She didn't argue. She didn't beg. She simply brushed the dust off her uniform, her posture suddenly taller than before. Her silence wasn't submission, it was defiance, a kind that needed no words. Gregory smirked, mistaking her composure for fear. He straightened his tie, adjusted his cufflinks, and spat on the ground. "Next time you even look my way, I'll make sure you regret it for good." He turned, smugness dripping from every step as he walked toward his car. The black Mercedes hummed as its lights blinked awake, the chrome reflecting his arrogance. Naomi stood rooted, her chest still heaving, but her jaw set tight. She didn't move until his car door slammed shut and the engine growled to life. The valet boys finally rushed forward wide-eyed. "Ma'am, are you okay?" one stammered. Naomi gave them the smallest nod, her eyes still locked on the spot where Gregory had stood. She didn't answer, but inside her chest, a fire that had been dormant for years began to burn again. She thought about her daughter at home, about every night she had scrubbed floors while men like Gregory walked past without seeing her. She thought about her father's voice, telling her as a little girl, "Strength is not in the noise you make, but in the silence you hold until the right moment." Gregory thought this was over. He thought his power would erase hers. But he was wrong, and Naomi knew it. That night, when she finally sat in her small apartment, her hands still sore from the pavement, she stared at herself in the mirror. The woman looking back wasn't just a janitor. She was a soldier. She was a mother. And she was a storm that had just been awakened. The next day, Gregory strutted into his office tower, boasting to his colleagues about how he put a cleaner in her place. His laughter echoed across marble floors, his lies dripping like poison in the air. What he didn't know, what he couldn't imagine, was that truth has a way of finding daylight. Gregory Hensley strutted through the glass doors of Whitestone Holdings the next morning with the swagger of a man who believed the world bent to his will. His Italian loafers clicked against polished marble, echoing like a declaration of power. He wore arrogance like a second suit, tailored, pressed, flawless. His assistant, a timid young man barely out of college, scurried beside him, juggling files and coffee as Gregory barked out instructions without looking at him. "Make sure the reporters know I'll be late to the press conference," Gregory snapped. "And for God's sake, tell them not to put me near that charity nonsense. I don't do sob stories. I fund mergers, not pity cases." The assistant nodded quickly, scribbling down every word, too afraid to ask why his boss's jaw was so tight or why his knuckles still bore faint red marks from the night before. Gregory carried the parking lot incident like a trophy in his mind. He replayed it with smug satisfaction. The way Naomi's eyes had looked up at him, the way the valets had stared in shock, the way he believed he had reminded her of her place. By the time he reached the executive floor, Gregory's smirk had returned. He told the story 3 times before noon, each retelling bigger, louder, crueler. "Stepped right on my shoes," he boomed to a circle of partners, and when I called her out, she tried to play victim. I showed her how real men deal with that kind of disrespect. The laughter that followed was uneasy, forced. Some nodded along, but others exchanged glances behind his back. Even in rooms of wealth, arrogance left a sour taste. But Gregory didn't notice. He never noticed. He believed fear was respect, and silence was agreement. To him, the world was always applauding. Naomi, however, wasn't applauding. At Crestwood Apartments, the hum of her daughter's laughter filled their small living room as cartoons played on an old television. Naomi sat quietly at the kitchen table, a steaming cup of tea cooling in her hands. Her daughter, Alina, only 9, had asked why her mother's uniform sleeve was torn. Naomi gave a gentle smile, brushing it off with just a clumsy moment at work. But the fire in her chest told a different story. She replayed every second in her mind. Gregory's spit, his words, his hand crushing against her throat. She felt the urge to fight rise in her again. The voice of her military past whispering that men like him didn't stop unless they were made to. She closed her eyes, remembering training drills, the sound of her drill sergeant's voice. Control your body. Control your breath. The fight isn't just in your fists, it's in your patience. Naomi had survived war zones. She had survived the loss of comrades, the silence of battlefields littered with sacrifice. She had survived coming home to a world that valued money over service, where uniforms were forgotten the second they were traded for coveralls. If she could endure that, she could endure Gregory's arrogance. But this time, she wouldn't just endure, she would rise. And as fate would have it, the world was already moving pieces Naomi hadn't seen. Down in the parking lot of Whitestone Towers, the valets who had witnessed the assault whispered about it over cigarettes. Man, did you see her face? She didn't even cry. She just stood there like stone. The delivery driver who'd paused the night before showed his friends the video he'd quietly taken on his phone. His hands had been shaking, but the footage was clear enough. Gregory's hand around Naomi's neck, his voice venomous. Naomi's silence stronger than any resistance. The clip was short, barely 30 seconds. But 30 seconds was all it took for truth to grow legs. By afternoon, it had left the driver's phone and found its way onto the feeds of friends, then strangers, then entire networks of people who didn't even know Naomi. And by evening, Gregory's name was no longer trending for mergers or million-dollar deals. It was trending for rage, for cruelty, for arrogance caught in the act. Inside her apartment, Naomi didn't scroll. She didn't even know yet. She folded laundry, cooked dinner, helped Alina with her homework. She moved with the same quiet grace she always had, her silence a shield, her dignity intact. She had no idea that the world outside her window was beginning to roar on her behalf. Gregory, meanwhile, still basked in the glow of his imagined superiority. At dinner with investors that night, he laughed so loudly the chandelier trembled. He ordered the most expensive wine, waved away the waiter's explanations, and dropped casual jabs about cleaners who don't know their place. But his phone buzzed again and again, messages piling in. Partners excused themselves, whispering at the bar. And for the first time that day, Gregory noticed the shift. The laughter wasn't following his anymore. It was circling elsewhere. By midnight, the clip was everywhere. Shared, reposted, dissected. Voices rose online. This is the man trusted with millions? This is leadership? Photos of Naomi in her uniform, her mop, her cart, circulated alongside hashtags demanding accountability. Some dug deeper, uncovering her military past, her service record glowing with honor and sacrifice. And suddenly the story wasn't just about a janitor being assaulted. It was about a veteran, a mother, a survivor. Gregory woke the next morning to silence in his penthouse. The calls had stopped, the text slowed. His assistant's voice trembled when he finally answered. Sir, we have a situation. Naomi, sipping tea at her kitchen table, still hadn't said a word to anyone. But her silence was speaking louder than Gregory's entire empire. Gregory Hensley's penthouse, once his sanctuary high above the city, was filled with a suffocating silence. The man who had always woken to the buzz of congratulatory emails and texts from eager partners now stared at his phone with trembling fingers. Notification after notification, but none of them praise. Headlines screamed from every platform. Billionaire CEO assaults janitor in parking lot. Clips looped endlessly, his sneer frozen in frame, his words, trash like you should know your place, played on repeat. He slammed the phone down on the marble counter, the glass trembling from the impact. "This is out of context," he bellowed to no one. His reflection stared back from the floor-to-ceiling windows, but for the first time he didn't see power. He saw desperation. His assistant entered timidly, clutching a folder. "Sir, there's been fallout. 2 of our investors pulled out this morning. They said they can't align with this kind of publicity." Gregory's face turned crimson. "They're cowards. Spineless cowards." He paced like a caged animal, tugging at his tie until it hung loose around his neck. His empire, built on fear and intimidation, was cracking, and the cracks weren't from outside enemies. They were from his own arrogance. Meanwhile, across town, Naomi tied her daughter's shoelaces and kissed her on the forehead before sending her off to school. She moved like any other morning, folding towels, scrubbing counters, humming softly to herself. But everywhere she went, eyes lingered longer. Neighbors paused mid-conversation, their smiles carrying a new warmth. Strangers nodded in quiet recognition. She didn't seek it, didn't ask for it, but Naomi's dignity was becoming a mirror for everyone who had ever been silenced. At Whitestone Holdings, Gregory tried to wrestle back control. He stormed into the boardroom, barking orders at executives who sat stiff, their eyes glued to laptops. Not him. "We issue a statement," Gregory declared, slamming his fist on the table. "We'll say she provoked me, that she was aggressive, threatening." "No, sir." One executive cut him off sharply. The man's voice wavered, but his resolve didn't. "That video is everywhere. Millions have seen it. Any attempt to shift blame will only make things worse." Gregory glared, veins bulging in his forehead. "So what do you suggest, huh? Then I apologize to some janitor?" He spat the word as if it tasted like poison. Silence filled the room. Not one pair of eyes lifted to meet his. And in that silence, Gregory felt something he hadn't in decades: irrelevance. Naomi, on the other hand, found herself in a place she never imagined. Her phone buzzed with calls she didn't recognize: journalists, community leaders, even veterans groups who had seen her name linked to her service. The short clip of her standing tall, brushing dust from her uniform after Gregory shoved her down, was circulating with captions like "Grace Under Fire" and "Silent Strength." When asked for interviews, Naomi declined. She wasn't chasing fame. She wasn't chasing vengeance. She was simply living her truth, her silence louder than Gregory's empire could ever roar. But the silence cut Gregory like a blade. That evening, he sat in his office, drink in hand, watching news anchors replay the incident with commentary. Some called for his resignation. Others dissected his history, pulling out old rumors of cruelty he thought he'd buried. The camera froze on Naomi's face, calm even as his hand gripped her throat. "That look," one anchor said. "It wasn't fear. It was resolve." Gregory hurled his glass at the screen, shards scattering across the floor. But the image remained in his mind, unshaken. Naomi's calm gaze, the very thing he thought powerless, had become his undoing. By the next morning, protesters gathered outside Whitestone Holdings. Signs reading "Respect workers" and "Dignity over dollars" bobbed in the crowd. Chants thundered through the glass lobby. Employees filed past them, some ashamed, some emboldened. Gregory tried to push through with bodyguards flanking him, but cameras flashed, microphones pushed forward, questions pelting him like stones. "Mr. Hensley, do you regret your actions? Why did you attack her? Is it true she's a veteran?" Gregory barked, no comment, but his voice cracked, desperation leaking into every syllable. Naomi, at home, sat with her daughter doing homework. The TV hummed softly in the background, the footage replaying once more. She glanced at the screen, then back at her daughter's face, choosing where her energy belonged. Her daughter looked up with wide eyes. "Mama, everyone's talking about you. Are you okay?" Naomi smiled gently, brushing a strand of hair from the girl's forehead. "I'm fine, baby. I've been through harder things. We don't let hate change who we are." Her words were simple, but they carried the weight of every battle she'd fought in silence. Gregory thought he had silenced her with force. But Naomi's refusal to shout, to flail, to sink to his level was what spoke loudest. She hadn't lifted a hand, hadn't raised her voice, and yet the world had chosen her side. The cracks in Gregory's empire widened. A major newspaper published an expose on his history of discriminatory practices. Former employees came forward, sharing stories of humiliation, of cruelty hidden under boardroom gloss. Stock prices dipped. Sponsors pulled out. Investors demanded answers. And Naomi still hadn't spoken. Her silence was the storm he never saw coming. Gregory Hensley's world crumbled in layers. Each morning brought fresh headlines, each sharper than the last. Whitestone CEO under fire for racist assault. Investors abandon Hensley amid scandal. Janitor's silent strength inspires millions. The video clip hadn't faded. It grew like fire licking through dry grass. The sight of Gregory's hand wrapped around Naomi's neck, his sneer, his words, it became a symbol, not of power, but of arrogance. And against it stood Naomi's silence, a dignity that could not be spun or erased. Inside Whitestone's boardroom, the once loyal executives turned cold. They whispered in corners, drafted letters of resignation, and plotted survival strategies without him. On the 27th floor, Gregory stormed in, his tie loose, his hair unkempt, barking orders. "You think you can push me out? I am Whitestone." But his words landed on stone faces. His empire no longer belonged to him. It belonged to the investors he had taken for granted. Effective immediately, one board member said, sliding a document across the polished table. "You are being removed as CEO. You've become a liability." Gregory's face drained of color. He shoved the paper away, veins bulging in his forehead. "You cowards. Spineless cowards." His voice cracked. "This is temporary. I'll come back stronger. I always do." But no one listened. The guards at the door weren't there for ceremony. They were there for him. He walked out not as a king, but as a man stripped bare. Cameras flashed as he stormed through the lobby, reporters hurling questions that cut like knives. "Do you regret it? What do you have to say to Naomi? Is this the end of your career?" He shoved microphones aside, his jaw tight, but the tremor in his hand betrayed him. Across town, Naomi folded laundry by the glow of her lamp. Her daughter sat beside her, braiding a doll's hair, her small hand steady. On the coffee table, Naomi's phone buzzed endlessly. Messages of support, offers of interviews, invitations to speak at rallies. She ignored them all. Fame wasn't what she wanted. Justice didn't need her voice. It was already speaking without her. And yet, her silence was anything but absence. It was presence. The clip of her calm, unbroken gaze had traveled further than Gregory's excuses ever could. Veterans groups honored her resilience. Parents told their children her story before bed, reminding them that strength doesn't always mean striking back. Students wore shirts with the words "Silent Victory" printed across the front, inspired by her dignity. Gregory sat in his penthouse, staring at his reflection in a dark window. The city pulsed below, but for the first time in his life, he wasn't part of its rhythm. His phone rang. Reporters, lawyers, former friends asking him to stay away. He poured himself another drink, but even the burn of alcohol couldn't drown out the sound of Naomi's silence echoing in his head. Meanwhile, Naomi walked her daughter to school, head high, shoulders steady. People stopped her on the street. Cashiers, neighbors, strangers, all offering nods of respect, some even clapping quietly as she passed. She smiled politely, always humble, always soft-spoken. She didn't need to tell them her story. They already knew it. The quiet victory was complete. Gregory's downfall wasn't sealed with a courtroom trial or a headline. It was sealed with the sight of Naomi standing tall after he tried to bring her down. He had grabbed her neck, tried to crush her spirit, but in doing so, he revealed to the world his own weakness. She didn't fight him. She didn't need to. Her silence had spoken louder than his entire empire. By the time evening fell, Naomi sat by her window, watching the city lights flicker. Her daughter curled beside her, drifting to sleep. Naomi brushed a hand over the girl's hair and whispered softly, "We don't need to shout to be heard. We just need to stand." Gregory's name would fade, remembered only as a cautionary tale of arrogance and cruelty. Naomi's name would live quietly in the hearts of those who saw strength in her stillness. And so the janitor who once cleaned parking lots walked into history without lifting a fist, without raising her voice. Hers was a victory that could never be undone. And that's how Gregory Hensley, the millionaire who thought money gave him the right to humiliate, lost everything at the hands of the one woman he looked down on. Naomi never shouted, never fought back with fists, yet her silence shook an empire. Now I'll leave you with this. What do you think is stronger, loud power or silent dignity? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Before you scroll, smash that subscribe button, turn on the bell, and like this video, because more stories like this are coming, and trust me, you don't want to miss what's next.